In this video, we're going to look at managing inventory, and there are two concepts that we're going to discuss. One is called ABC analysis, and the other is cycle counting or accuracy of inventory records. Now, ABC analysis is based on the principle that not all inventory items are equal. There are some inventory items which may involve very little investment in terms of dollar amounts, and there may be other inventory items that may involve large amounts of capital investment. So the amount of management effort and time needed, or one would want to spend in fine-tuning the inventory decisions, should be different for these kinds of different inventory items. The ones that involve large amounts of investment must be managed in a much more efficient way, because the benefits of cost saving is much larger than items that are low in capital investment, where spending a lot of our time and energy may not be worthwhile because the return or the cost savings is not going to be very much, very meager or marginal. So ABC analysis looks at inventory in terms of how much capital is invested in each item, and then arranges them into three categories: A, B, and C. So class A are the high annual dollar volume items, and this is based on how much dollar amount is spent in 1 year. So high dollar amount, annual dollar amount goes as A. The medium annual dollar amount are categorized as B, and the remaining low annual dollar amounts are categorized as C. Okay. This is used to establish policies that focus on the few critical parts and not the many trivial ones. So the principle being, just a few parts would constitute class A items, and then a large part of the inventory will be class C. And this comes from empirical observation. If you look at the items, this is how it will typically be about, and this is not a hard and fast rule, but it is an empirical kind of thumb rule that a small part, maybe about 10 to 20% or 15% is shown here in this graph, but around 15% of the items, okay, like for example, if you have 100 items in your inventory, somewhere between 10 and 20 items will constitute almost like 80%, around that value. Okay, again, remember, this is not a formula, it is a thumb rule. So about 80% of the total dollar amount invested will constitute only about 10 to 15 or 20 items at best. And on the other side, almost half the items, if you have 100 items, about 50 items will constitute about 5 to 10% of the dollar value, and everything in between will be class B. So this is an empirical observation that we can use in a given company to categorize inventories into these three groups. And here is an example where we have these items. Okay, these are the annual volume in units. This is your unit cost. When you multiply annual units with unit cost, gives you annual dollar volume. So now you arrange this list from the largest to the smallest, and you'll see about 10 to 15 to 20% at the max. So here is 20% as A. 20% are classified as A. Then at the bottom, about 50% of the items will constitute only 5% of value, and those are C's, and in between are B's. So this is the principle. Okay, we'll work out an example in just a few minutes. And along with the dollar amounts invested, we can also include other considerations in our ABC analysis, like items with high storage cost, or items that are going to change in design or engineering changes. And if you have problems that are critical and have delivery problems or quality problems, they can be highly critical items, and they may be classified as class A items needing close attention. So one of the things that we could use ABC analysis for is to identify items that must emphasize quality, or there are problems with those items, and more care to be focused on managing those items. Tighter physical inventory controls, more emphasis on supplier development, or more care in forecasting to make sure that the forecasting error are reduced. So in other words, more management attention is to be paid to those class A items. Now, record accuracy, on the other hand, is extremely important. Most of the decisions, inventory decisions, are made using the computer record of how much inventory is on hand. Nobody is going to go to the storeroom and check what exactly is the available inventory physically. Okay, that's never going to happen. So there must be confidence that what is shown in the computer records accurately reflects what's actually in store. Accurate records are critical for inventory decisions. And also there are a couple of systems, inventory systems, that we will be discussing. Periodic system is one where regular intervals you check your inventory, and there is perpetual inventory that tracks inventory every time there is a change made. So in either of these two cases, the records must reflect the actual inventory. And how do you do that? How do you make sure that there are no errors, or if there are errors, the errors are corrected? And it is done through what is called cycle counting. And cycle counting is to count the inventories on a rotating basis. So you start counting. So if you have 100 items, so count the first item, make sure that if there are errors, the errors are corrected. Then count the second item, count the third item, count the fourth item, and so on. But you do this in different frequencies. Class A items are more critical, and therefore you want to count them more often than, say, Class C items, which are not that critical. You do want accurate records for Class C items also, but Class A items are more important. And of course, Class B is in between importance. So what do? Class A items, you may say, okay, we want the frequency of counting to be once every 3 months, or once every 6 weeks, or once every 2 weeks. You decide how often those items should be recounted. Class B items, you may be more relaxed. You can say, all right, 6 months, or maybe 3 months, 3 to 6 months, or 4 months, or something like that. And Class C items, you may say, all right, you can be more relaxed and say, if we can count those items every once in 6 months, that'll be all right, or once in every 8 months, it'll be all right. So based on this policy, you have to develop a plan as to how many items you must count every day or every week, so that you can achieve the frequency of counting that you need. And here are the advantages of making sure this counting is done properly. If you count and make sure that the records are kept accurately, then of course you will not have any surprises in terms of running out of stock, leading to shutdowns and interruptions, and you will eliminate annual inventory adjustment. If you have a policy of counting only once every year, then except for the time when you correct the inventory, the rest of the time you have absolutely no idea whether the inventory records are correct or not. So it eliminates the annual adjusting of inventory. And then you will have trained personnel dedicated to audit the inventory accuracy. So they are responsible for making sure that there are no errors or discrepancy between computer record and physical availability. And of course, it allows for the errors to be identified in a timely fashion, and it maintains accurate inventory records. So here is an example. Suppose we have total 5,000 items in inventory, of which 500 are A, 1750 are B, and 2750 are C. Now, the policy of counting, okay, let us assume that Class A items must be counted every month. So that is 20 working days in 1 month. Now Class B items, we're going to be a little more relaxed. So every quarter, so that is 60 days. And Class C items, we will be even more relaxed and say, as long as we count it once every 6 months or 120 days, it'll be all right. So here are the number of items in Class A, B, and C. The quantity here refers to number of items. And you want these counted once every month. So 500 divided by 20, so you need to count 25 items of class A every day. So that way, every month you will cycle back to the first item that you counted. So 1750 of B must be counted every 60 days. So divide 60 into 1750. So you have to count 29 items every day. And class C is every 120 days. So 2750 divided by 120. So class C you have to count 23 every day. So for a total of 77 items to be counted every day, of which 25 must be A, 29 must be B, and 23 must be C. And if we follow this plan, we will count those items according to the policy we have established. So this process is called cycle counting.